Right, time now for our business update, and Anke Uhler joins me in the studio. Good morning, Anke. Now we're starting in the US, where President Donald Trump is delivering on his promise to put America first.
That's right. He's calling it a historic day for American steel. On Thursday, he signed a memorandum ordering an investigation to find out if imports of foreign steel are threatening U.S. national security. Bolstering the U.S. steel industry was a recurring theme of Trump's campaign. The investigation could be the first step to enacting tariffs on steel imports, risking new trade tensions with China. Here Trump is, right after the signing on Thursday at the White House.
We're going to fight for American workers and American-made steel, and that's beginning immediately. For decades, America has lost our jobs and our factories to unfair foreign trade. And one steel mill after another has been shut down, abandoned, and closed. And we're going to reverse that.
Well, more news coming from the US, and the tax reforms that President Trump has been promising may finally be on their way.
That's right. There have been some doubts that one of Trump's major campaign promises would come to fruition after the administration missed several of its deadlines for releasing its tax plan. But on Thursday, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said that they are close to bringing forward, quote, major tax reform. He said that the plan would be revealed very soon and that he hoped the tax overhaul would be passed by the end of the year.
So how are the Asian markets trading after all that news from the White House, Anke?
Well, surprisingly, shares from most Asian steel companies actually rose despite the news. We're also seeing positive responses from Asian markets to fresh hopes of U.S. tax cuts. Tokyo's Nikkei and Seoul's Kospi both up around 1 percentage point. Chinese stocks fell amid fears of an economic slowdown in the country. And investors, of course, are also wary of this weekend's round of French elections. The euro is still holding steady just below its 3-week high against the dollar this Friday.
Tell us more about some of the economic factors that might affect voting this weekend here in France.
Well, one group of voters to keep an eye on is French farmers, who are dealing with the deepest crisis in their industry since World War II. There are more than 500,000 farms in France, but that's less than 50% than 15 years ago. Faced with lower prices for their products and rising costs of production, many farming communities are turning to anti-establishment parties, which they hope will solve their problems. Here's Ellen Gainsford with more.
Dominique Pipet has been a farmer for more than 30 years. But rising costs mean he's struggling to make ends meet.
I sell the meat per kilo at the same price as 25 or 30 years ago. But what we have to invest, the price of the vet and everything else we need, has risen sharply since then. It's killing our livelihood.
France is the largest agricultural producer in the EU, but the industry is struggling. A third of French farmers are living on only €350 a month. Many feel ignored by politicians.
Farmers aren't getting any attention in this campaign. Like every year, we were under the spotlight at the agriculture fair. They take pictures with us and the cattle, but other than at the fair, the farming world does not get a lot of attention from politicians.
France receives more farming subsidies than any other country in the EU. But some French farmers blame EU regulations for the low price of their produce and excessive bureaucracy.
This is the desk where we spend 60% of our time filling in forms.
Many disillusioned farmers are turning away from establishment parties. Marine Le Pen's anti-EU, anti-globalization rhetoric strikes a chord with countryside communities. These voters could prove decisive. Around 20% of the electorate lives in rural areas.
It's time now for some more business headlines from around the world. General Motors has been forced to shutter its Venezuela plant and lay off 2,700 Venezuelan workers after local authorities seized its production facilities and car stock, GM said. The largest U.S. automaker vowed to take all legal actions to defend its rights, and U.S. officials said that they're reviewing the seizure. GM is the latest foreign company to be forced out of the country amid deadly nationwide anti-government protests in the South American nation. Electric car maker Tesla has recalled 53,000 Model S and Model X vehicles around the world to fix a parking brake issue. It's the company's biggest ever recall. Tesla said that less than 5% of the vehicles being recalled may be affected, and it would take less than 45 minutes to replace the brakes. Shares dropped 1% after the recall announcement.
And finally, Anke, a sign that we may finally be living in the future.
Yes, despite all of the technological advances that we've seen in the past years, it won't quite feel like we're living the future until we're all driving around in our own flying cars, driving or flying. So good news. A Slovakian startup is making that dream a reality as soon as the end of this year, actually. Aeromobile unveiled its version of a flying car this week. It's a hybrid-powered four-wheeled car that converts to an aircraft so you can drive it and also fly it. But there is a catch. On top of the $1.3 million you'll need to buy the car, you also need a pilot's license to fly it. So for those of you who meet the requirements, pre-orders are starting this year, and the car is expected to hit the streets and the skies by 2020.
Well, that does sound like a lot of fun, but I'm not sure I have the funds to get myself one of those cars. Anke, thank you so much for that. Anke Uhle there with the Business Roundup.